Hello, everybody, and good afternoon. Welcome to Adapting Promoting First Relationships Through a Trauma-Informed Lens. I'm Amanda Hopping-Wynn, Director here at the National Abandoned Infants Assistance Resource Center, located at the University of California at Berkeley. Funded by Health and Human Services Children's Bureau, our mission here at the Resource Center is to enhance the quality of social and health services delivered to children and families affected by substance use and/or HIV by providing quality training, information, and resources directly to the professionals who work with these families. Today's webinar will be presented by Valentina Laprade and Regina Clement. Valentina, Director of Family Preservation, has 25 years in the field of social work. In addition to her work in the substance use and child welfare fields, she carries a specialization in early intervention. Currently, she oversees one of our AIA grants, Families Growing Together, which is measuring child safety, permanency, and well-being through caregiver bonding and attachment in a controlled treatment design. Regina is Supervisor of Family Preservation and has over 20 years of experience in the social work field, working for institutions like the Providence School Department and Women and Infants Hospital. Currently works for Children's Friend as the Supervisor for Families Growing Together. Before we begin, I want to remind you that you may ask your questions via the chat feature in the lower left portion of the screen. We'll be pausing a few times throughout the presentation for questions, but please feel free to chat them in at any point. They will be answered in the order in which they are received. And now I'd like to turn it over to Tina. Thank you both so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, Amanda. Hello, everyone. My name is Valentina Laprade, and everyone calls me Tina. And looking forward today to talking about kind of our journey through working with these families over the last 3.5 years. And this is my the supervisor in Families Growing Together, Regina Clement.
Hello, everyone. So we're going to get the presentation started.
Yep. Next slide.
Bear with us, please.
And yes, we are social workers. We are not IT folks, so hang in there. So next slide.
Yes. So Families Growing Together is a program that works with families who would like help with making their relationship with their child better. And so these families are referred to us by our programs within Children's Friend, which is our overarching agency. These families usually are either substance affected, have some type of medically at-risk child or they're medically at risk, or are HIV or AIDS infected. These services are provided in the home or in the community, and they are clinically based. So there is a clinical component where we, of course, work with promoting first relationships. And then we have a case management component where the peer mentors go in and work on concrete needs for the family. So we definitely provide services through the clinicians that we have in our program. I'm the supervisor. I oversee all of the work that's done there, and we have a peer mentor. The peer mentor really is designed to work on concrete needs, so offering transportation, going to court, any type of advocacy in the court, whether it be in family court or criminal court, assistance with getting housing, school, food, any type of need that they may have that's going to make it easier for them to really focus on their relationship with their child.
So about 4 years ago, through some of the work I've been doing with the RPG, Regional Partnership Grants, I had a program still up and running, Project Connect, and we were doing research back then around many different outcomes, but one of the primary outcomes was parent-child relationships. And during that time, I went to a workshop on promoting first relationships and found that it was really a good fit for some of the work we were thinking about doing in the future with our families. So basically, Promoting First Relationships is a curriculum-based, psychoeducational-based program that helps parents and other caregivers really work on meeting the social emotional needs of very young children under age 3. It was developed out of the University of Washington by Dr. Jean Kelly, and again, very focused on attachment and bonding. And that's really what I liked about when I saw the presentation during those clinical conferences. What I really enjoyed about and why I thought it was a good match for us was it dug much deeper into the subtleties of relationships and really honored the relationship between the caregiver and the young child. There are circle of security components within, so if you're familiar with that work, it's really interesting and helpful work with parents. It makes a lot of sense when we've been implementing PFR. We found that circle of security really resonates with a lot of our parents for them themselves and also with their relationship with their child. Okay, go ahead, Regina.
I also wanted to add that Promoting First Relationships is really unique. It allows the clinician to videotape the family when they are working with them. And I think that that's a huge resource for us because I think our families don't really see themselves in a helping way with their children. These families are usually court involved, they're involved with child welfare, and they really have been kind of given this message that their parenting isn't good enough. And so when we're in there with them, working with them, using the videotaping, they see themselves in a totally different light. And, you know, our intent is to say to them that we view you as the expert here and that, you know, we're coming to you asking you what do you want to work with, but we really do feel like that they are the expert. And I think that's what I love about this program.
Yeah, and very much an empowerment model. I'm with you on that.
Right.
Very, very much an empowerment model for parents. And we had one of our first parents that came through. She was a person who grew up in the child welfare system, was substance affected as a child, her parents, so a lot of intergenerational types of issues. And I remember having a conversation with her, and what she talked about was, you know, just kind of in general, it was informal, but asking her, so what's working for you with this program? And she said it was the first time anyone had ever told her that she was a good parent, that and that she had come to the conclusion herself in watching the videotapes and getting the feedback that she actually could do this, that she that her child did attend to her, that her child, you know, one of her fears or concerns was that her child didn't think she was a good mom. This was an 8-month-old. And through this process, she was really able to say that, you know, I am connected to my child is connected to me. And it was a really powerful kind of conversation that we had, and the work with her was pretty powerful, right. Definitely. So the population, when we wrote the grant for AIA, we certainly expected parents who were going to have some challenges, particularly around co-occurring disorders and housing. Most of the population that we worked with in the Project Connect program and continue to work with have a multitude of issues, particularly poverty, homelessness for some of our parents, co-occurring, domestic violence, trying to think of what else. But pretty much definitely adult mental health issues and children's mental health issues. So we weren't coming at this in too much of a naive way, and yet at the same time, we did expect when we designed AI Families Growing Together that the predominance of families that would be referred to us would be folks who lived at home with their children. We did put in a small component for children who were in foster care and a visitation component, and we had very strong views around what visitation really needed to look like for them. Far more than what our current child welfare system has in place. What we got was referrals that most of the kids were out of the home in our current FGT population.
Mm-hmm.
A pretty traumatized population, and traumatized in the sense of intergenerational child welfare involvement. I would say, I don't know how many, Regina, but the first cohort of people coming through were almost nearly all of them were young adults who had grown up in the system themselves, and now their children were placed in the system, and had multiple traumas around domestic violence, around substance use, around
abuse and neglect.
Abuse and neglect, and lack of real connection with their parents.
Right.
A real disrupted relational issues, I would say, as far as the intergenerational child welfare involvement.
Absolutely.
We also saw a lot of interpersonal violence. And again, as I said, we didn't come at this as total naive folks, but I got to say that it surprised us the level of interpersonal violence that we were seeing, and community violence.
Yeah, and when we say interpersonal violence, we're talking not just about, domestic violence, male on female. We're talking about mom and daughter, or, sister and brother. I mean, there was a lot of that going on in these homes that these children were living in, or the Child Welfare Agency was considering to reunify the children or child in. So there was a lot of work that we would have to do around making sure that these kids were safe when they returned home.
So, and then poverty, we were expecting that. I will say, though, 4 years ago when we first wrote the grant, we have a lot more homeless folks now than we did at the beginning. And I think that's a sign of the times, unfortunately. Again, we had banked in the fact that we would have a visitation component. And what we found, but we thought the predominance, 75% of our cases would be kids in the home with their parents, and about 25% out of the home. And what we found is really the reverse, is that the bulk of the children being referred to us, and this isn't from the child welfare system, these are from programs within Children's Friend, because we viewed this as a value-added service across all of the programs here at Children's Friend. So the types of programs we have here, very briefly, are Head Start, Early Head Start, NFP, Healthy Families America. We have Project Connect. We have a family counseling department. We have First Connections, which is a VNA visiting health, nursing service. So we were expecting, certainly, what we had predicted, and what happened was kind of the reverse.
Right.
So we had to make some adjustments. We had a lot of parents co-parenting, but not in a healthy way or in a healthy relationship. So we had a mom and a dad, and they were, in a lot of ways, very young adults.
Yes.
And a lot of our folks are young adults, and a lot of going back and forth. We had to set a lot of limits. We'll get into lessons learned as we go along. And the other interesting part of our population was certainly our cognitively delayed parents, either cognitively delayed through lack of education. A lot of them had IEPs themselves growing up, and or head trauma. We had several parents who came through that had significant head trauma, either from a domestic violence incident or some kind of violence incident, either in childhood or later on as young adults. So, Regina, next one.
So, of course, we realized that we needed to adapt PFR to the program that we were running. PFR really was designed to work with a single parent and a child, and really was not designed to work with two parents, or parents who needed visitation, or parents who had adult conflict with each other. So we really had to do some real soul searching and coming up with some real innovative ways to adapt PFR so that our program was effective with the families that we serviced. So, of course, staff was like, Regina, we need to extend the length of time that we're doing the curriculum. PFR is done in a 12-week session, and for those of you on this call, I know, our clients, when they're in crisis, they're in crisis. So you may be ready to go in there with your curriculum, your assessment, and the minute you walk in the door, all heck's breaking loose. So you are not able to do your agenda. So you need to be able to roll with the punches. And so we really decided that we needed to extend the curriculum. So we doubled it. We said we're gonna do the curriculum in 24 weeks, and that allows us to, if a family's in crisis, okay, we'll put the curriculum aside for the week and really focus on getting folks stabilized. So that was one of the things that we came across.
We also found with some of our cognitively limited parents that we wanted to be able to repeat or revisit some of the curriculum more than once. Right.
The other thing that we kind of came into, an issue around was adult safety and helping folks regulate their anger. And like we had said, we're working with, a set of parents. They may not be together anymore and they're still angry with one another, but they're going to co-parent this child. The department is, mandating that they work together and co-parent this child. The parents have said to us and identified that they want to work together, but sometimes they just couldn't get along. And so sometimes we had to kind of sit down with the parents, separate and apart from doing PFR, and really kind of talking with them about how are they going to co-parent and coexist, set limits with each other. So in the visit, how are you going to address one another? How are you going to pick up and drop off? That kind of stuff was discussed, because we would have parents, they would have these huge blowouts either before they walked into our visitation center or, God forbid, during. We had a couple of those. And, of course, when they were leaving, they would have these blow-ups where they really just could not manage their anger. So a lot of focus was on discussing how are you going to be able to co-parent, do it safely, and think about your child first. So that was definitely something that we had to adapt. Again, PFR was not designed for that. PFR was designed to work with a single parent and a child.
Interestingly, a lot of the tenets of PFR are, as adults, we need to be bigger, wiser, kinder when you read the work. And so we were able to use a lot of that language and how you want to be with your child. So you also utilize a lot of those approaches with each other as adults. So a lot of times we had to bring people back, and it was great teaching moments and great opportunities, but not necessarily how I think the curriculum was initially intended. Mm-hmm. But it was really good stuff.
Right.
So some of the things that we had to look at, though, was...
and in PFR, one of the things that we kind of came upon was that one of the components of the curriculum was to show a video. And this video was labeled Safe versus Scary. And it really, when we used it initially, it triggered our clients who had trauma histories. And so we really had to sit down and kind of come up with a way to either still show that video and address the triggering that was happening for clients, or go back to the national presenters of PFR and say, look, we may not be able to use this component. Is that going to be a problem for you? And would you give us permission to, like, maybe, put it aside so that we're not, triggering our clients, of course.
Yeah. We learned that pretty much in the first year.
Right.
And actually, Julie is wonderful to work with, the trainer from PFR. And she went back. I remember us calling her,
right,
and over the phone, lots of conversations. Mm-hmm. Where, really bringing up that, and when we say triggering, we mean like people really weeping and having a lot of in-body experiences of trauma, really dysregulating pretty quickly over a very short video. And the video is basically very quickly, but, the same walk through kind of a field and through the woods. It shows you walking through that, and in one part of it, it plays this very happy kind of serene music. And then the second one is the same footage, but with some really kind of creepy kind of music going on. And when we hit the creepy stuff, people really got visibly upset and were talking about how, and a lot of stuff would come up for them.
And again, PFR, their intent was to help parents kind of identify when they hear their shock music is the language that they use. So when they hear this shock music, things that make them stressed or anxious, how do they deal with that? And then helping them kind of parallel that with their child and how their child may feel anxious or scared, and how are you going to help them regulate that? So that was the purpose of that video, but it definitely, for the population we were serving, was not serving them well. So we definitely went ahead and consulted with the national team, and they gave us permission to exclude it from the curriculum, which we were very happy about, as well as developing a safety-focused visitation guidelines for families. So one of the things that Tina mentioned earlier was that because of the types of clients we were getting, visitation became a huge component for our program. And when I say visitation, I mean we're picking up the child from daycare or from the home, the foster home, bringing them to the visitation center, having the visit with the client, the parents, and then returning the child back to the foster home or the child care center. So this was something that we said that in our writing the grant, that's not going to be a lot. It's probably going to be about maybe 25%. It turned out to be like 80%. And so we really had to design a way to meet those needs of those clients. And also what we found out was, again, because of the adult conflict going on with our clients, we really had to come up with some guidelines on how visitation would be. So what the expectation was, you are not to come to your visit under the influence. You are not to bring, random folks to your visit with you. If you are going to, bring, someone, they need to be approved by the department, or we need to at least be able to determine whether or not this person is safe to be around your child or even in our building.
So basically with this is that we had to set a lot of mostly rules around communication to keep everyone safe. And safety is really our primary, as far as through the lens of trauma, our primary goal is to make sure everyone is safe, not only physically but also emotionally.
Right.
And because parents can't attend if they're feeling emotionally not present, they're not able to attend to their child's cues, be able to read them, and really get a good have a good session with their child.
Mm-hmm. More things that we changed again was providing information to the foster parents or the kinship placements, information about PFR. We know that PFR, again, was designed for one parent, one child, but when we're working with families who are, separated, their child is in some type of foster care or kinship care, the department or the family has made arrangements for those people, those parents, the foster parents, to meet outside of our visitation. So sometimes our idea was to give this information to the foster parent, give this information to the family member to let them know what the expectation was, what to expect in their visits with these parents, and know what the language was, know what the circle of security meant, know what a safe haven is. And so that was some of the stuff that we had wanted to give to the foster parents that we were working with and the foster care providers that we were working with. We also wanted to share
and most of the families that we were working with were kin placements, and so really, and sometimes they were basically concurrent planning was going on.
Right.
So if the parents weren't necessarily going to reunify with their children as their forever family and long term, then we were also, our thinking was also preparing the foster families, particularly those kin placements, to be able to have some of the skills that we were developing across the board.
Right. In addition to that, of course, we're working with child care, child welfare workers, and other clinicians outside the agency and within our agency. We wanted them to know what we were doing as well. We wanted them to know what PFR was and how the curriculum really does support this attachment and bonding piece that's so crucial for the families that we're working with, and really the importance of early relationships and how it's most important. And one of the things that we would talk about with the child welfare workers, because they always were very much of the mindset they get one visit every other week. That's what we're obligated to do. And so for us, we presented PFR to them to let them know, guess what? You may want to provide more visits to these families. If you are looking for these families to have a healthy attachment and bond, one visit every other week is not going to cut it. We recommend a minimum of 2 hours a week. Minimum. Bare minimum.
For
two
young
visits.
Children.
Right, for young children. Early childhood development is very important. So this is the kind of work that we were doing with child welfare, with these agencies that we were working with collaboratively, and teaching them about PFR and what the norm is, what the standard of practice was.
Absolutely, and also not to build the bond with the children and the parents, between the parents and the child, but also not traumatize the young children either. We really wanted to make sure those children had, continued that attachment and that bond.
Right. So, of course, we also talked about how we had parents who had cognitive delays, and it became obvious early on that we needed to kind of come up with a better way of explaining the materials to our families that we were working with who had the cognitive delays. PFR, the concept, it's pretty radical. So I'm thinking, we needed to spend more time with those families. So we were able to collaborate with our neuropsychologists in the area, and we actually have a psychiatrist on staff here at Children's Friend, where we could sit down and really kind of problem solve about how to get PFR communicated to those families in a way that they understood and could retain the information. So for those of you in education and special education, and that rote learning is how folks with cognitive disabilities can retain information. So really kind of making sure that the information that we give is repetitive, that they get handouts, that that they're in folders and they're laminated, and referring back to them so that they really get the information that we're getting and giving. And then, of course, one of the things we thought, later on was that we needed to do a 3-month follow-up. I think that what we found was it was very important for us to go in and see how parents are doing after the 6 months. Families Growing Together is a 6-month program, so we only worked for 6 months with each family. So this 3-month follow-up really allowed for us to go in and see if they retained the information, if they were still using the tools that we gave them. And, for me, I always say we gave them a little bonus. We gave them a DVD with all of their videos on it so that they can refer back to them, when we're no longer in their home.
And our clinician, one of our clinicians, she would do the 3-month follow-ups, and what we found was people were, and this wasn't a formal part of our evaluation, but at the 3-month follow-up, most of the parents were still really, no matter what circumstance they were in, whether they were unified with their children or they still had their children with them, they were using those principles in PFR. And they were able to also talk about some of the changes they had made in their lives via the Project Mentor, as far as getting hooked up with clinical services around their traumatic either childhoods or the trauma going on in their lives. So we were able to, those were like the 2 big things that they talked about being very helpful to them.
So, of course, we did an evaluation. And
continue to do an evaluation.
And continue to do an evaluation. It's very, very important. Collecting data. So, of course, we were able to get some real good stats out of this. So, of course, and what we love to hear is that there were less developmental delays with the children that we were working with. So really helping parents to recognize how to play with their children, how to assess whether or not their child is in need of additional supports. So, getting them hooked up with, early intervention, making sure that, they are using the resources that are available to them in their cities and towns, so that the delays, if any, really were minimized, throughout their involvement with us and moving forward. Also improving child well-being. I think this is huge. I think parents were able to identify the social and emotional needs that children had. I think early on, when we first started working with families, this was something that they struggled with. They really did not, know how to pick up cues or, recognize a disengagement cue to an engagement cue. So these were things that over the 6 months that we worked with families, they were really able to hone in on and able to carry that forward as well. Parenting abilities and their parent-child bond, that also increased. And again, I think that had everything to do with, feeling confident about the work that they were doing with their children, feeling confident about playing with their children and knowing what's going on, and being able to pick up on their child's cues. These were things that really, I think, improved the way that they felt about themselves and also made them better parents. And again, parent-child relationships, stronger bonds between both parent and child. That was huge, great success in making sure that, parents, who may have in the past, may have left a child, in front of a TV. Now that stuff didn't happen anymore. And then, of course, increasing safety in the home, making sure that children are supervised, things like that, and really recognizing what's age appropriate and what's not.
And so just very briefly, as far as our evaluation, we did a randomized control with a really kind of very interesting, I don't know what you call it, but add-on, which is, so we absolutely did a randomized control. So as families were referred into us, they would randomize either immediately into treatment and or they would go on to the control wait list. And the cool part of that was, at least from a practice standpoint, was that after 6 months of being on the control wait list, they could then the family had the option of actually receiving treatment. So a lot of families took us up on that and were able to get some of our in-house clinicians and referring folks had a hard time with that. They didn't want their clients to wait. And I will say it was very nice to be able to do that randomized control and also be able to cross-compare that data. I find that data always informs how we move forward with our practice, and it's so incredibly helpful. Our evaluators, Bill and Lenore, are just awesome to work with and give us great feedback, not only what we're doing well, but also the areas that we could really shore up. So I just so appreciate working with them.
Absolutely. And I mean, just like I had mentioned before under what the data says on the children, again, improved parenting abilities. Our parents really felt confident in the role of a parent. They, and they would share with us that, they never thought that they would be the expert when raising their child, that their child would look at them as their safe haven. So this really kind of, boosted their confidence in their ability to parent. Sensitivity to their child's cues. One of the things that I felt strongly about was that a lot of our parents really did not recognize their child's cues. And it could have been for multiple reasons. It could have been, the child was removed early on and they were working towards reunification, that kind of thing. But sitting down and reviewing with them, what are your child's cues. One of the wonderful tools that PFR uses is called baby cues, and it really is it's like flashcards. And so you pass them out to parents, and it's a way for them to actually see what, a child in distress looks like, and what, different facial expressions. What does that mean? What does your baby's cry mean? There's certain, cries that, a baby makes, and that's because they're hungry, or it's because they need their diaper changed, that kind of thing. So doing a lot of that work with parents, our parent mentors were definitely doing the lion's share of that.
Yeah, they did good work.
Mm-hmm. And then, learn to foster their child's social and emotional growth. Again, really identifying what their child's social and emotional needs was huge. Some of our parents, and this was probably maybe, the second time around, they really didn't know what they were, what a social and emotional need was for their children.
And I think a lot of that comes from, for at least the population we were seeing, they experienced a lot of deprivation.
Absolutely.
And or discouragement
Right.
of their social emotional needs.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to, from a trauma perspective,
Mm-hmm.
See some real gains for them
Right.
and their children is very exciting.
Exactly. Having a better relationship with their child and fostering their child's cognitive development. Again, going back, making sure that their child's needs are being met.
And just real fast, I have a question that came in.
Sure.
Folks are wondering how you measured that parent-child bond or the attachment.
So we have, as part of one of the tools we used is through NCAST, the parent inventory. We also use the NCFIS G,
Mm-hmm.
and we also use the the NCAST network survey as some of our measures. The NCAST parent inventory is pretty intensive training.
Absolutely.
And if you I highly recommend it as far as really, particularly for young children and parents, around being able to read cues and the subtleties of cues. It was very helpful. And we, as far as PFR with the videotaping and how we were trained in that, is we're really looking to, we have now video evidence of parents, playing with their children, teaching their children, and also we're in reviewing those tapes in individual supervision and in team supervision. We're looking for, very specific relational cues and relational interactions. So that's how we measured the NCAST.
Yeah, the NCAST was, for me, the NCAST was
Yeah.
definitely the tool that we used, and what we would speak to child welfare, the child welfare agency about. That was the tool that we used when we talked about attachment and bonding.
And that tool has, I believe, it has 8 sections. And what we liked about that tool is that a lot of instruments, when we were doing this research, measure what the parent's putting out there to the child. In this tool, there's 2 domains that it's also what the child's putting back to the parent.
Mm-hmm.
And that we can look at that. So sometimes you had parents who were actually putting a whole lot out there, and the child wasn't necessarily responding or wasn't a very responsive child. So then it was a different kind of conversation with the parent than a child who's putting a whole lot of a lot of information out there for the parent, and the parent's missing it. So does that seem to answer folks' questions?
Yeah, just one small follow-up. You mentioned that it requires quite a bit of training. Does that mean that it is also fairly expensive?
Yeah.
I
would say, honestly, I would say in the context of other trainings we've done, it's not horribly expensive. There's I would say it certainly. I don't want to get into prices. But I would say contact them.
There's definitely an investment of time.
Yes.
It's a 4-day training.
And it's very, you have to do tapes. You have to be with the national office. The 2 trainers who came out and did that with us, and they do it on an annual basis, The other thing is that we were also research certified, all of the crew that is doing PFR. So in order to be research certified, you have to hit a certain level of accuracy through NCAST. Where not research certified, you might not have to invest as much time, but we were all research certified because we wanted to be research certified, and that was part of what we put in our proposal. So, and we do that on an annual basis. So I would say the initial upfront costs are pretty moderate, and then the ongoing annual is less so.
Right.
The annual visits, our recertification were 2 days,
Right.
and at that point, if you're doing this a lot, you can even get it done faster.
Right, right.
So I hope that answered people's questions.
Yeah. It's a great tool.
It is.
It really is.
Highly recommend it.
Yes.
Call Google NCAST and contact us out of Seattle.
Yeah.
And they have lots of trainings. I usually get them coming in on my into my email probably once a month. They send them out. Another tool that we didn't use that I think for future use, just while we're on this, is they also have a feeding scale. So for any of the health professionals or even social workers, I'm a social worker by training, the feeding scales, I would love to have us get trained up in those at some point. We need to write another grant.
Right.
But there was a lot of, in what I saw in that, a lot of good stuff going on for that tool.
Right.
Other questions?
I'll let you finish, and then we'll save the rest for the end.
Okay.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. So lessons learned was regarding our program design. Basically, 6 months was not enough. Even we doubled it, and it wasn't enough. And mostly because of the population I think we were serving. That and parents said that they said that it wasn't enough. That they really, as I said, for a lot of them, this was one of their first experiences hearing that they had strengths, that they had, that their child was really in line with them, that they had a better understanding of bonding and attachment, and an understanding of their social emotional needs and how to meet them, or they started down that path.
Right, right.
And then also how to meet their child's social emotional needs. So it was really really good work, and 6 months was not enough.
Yeah, I think staff was also saying that, they just felt like they were just getting ready or getting into like the nitty gritty, and then, our program was over, the sessions were over.
Right.
And of course, being able to, at that point, because you've created this therapeutic relationship with our families, that's when they really wanted to talk about the trauma in their life. And that's when we really had to refer out at that point. So just kind of being mindful of that was definitely something, we're going to be looking at moving forward.
And then, again, with any kind of changes, we were in constant communication with Julie and the national office around changes. So she would come out, she was coming out twice a year, and then most recently once a year, but twice a year she would meet with us. We actually did pay her to stay an extra day just to meet with our staff and talk through, particularly in the early time, early in the beginning, to talk through the type of clientele we were seeing, some of our concerns. She gave us really good consultation, really enjoyable, like really thoughtful, mindful consultation around some of the adaptations we could make. And also she came prepared with, some trauma research, some of the other research that they had done. So it was, for us, it was a very rewarding relationship through this process. We made changes to PFR regarding curriculum and tools. So some tools we took out. The video definitely went, we said goodbye to that. But we also, as I said, we sometimes had to do a lot of repetition with some of our families, and also add some other tools in. So we did some adding, and the peer mentor certainly did a lot of reinforcement during her visits and his visits. So having someone that actually had, they themselves were what we were looking for in peer mentors, were people who had experience either with child welfare system or poverty or, substance use in their lives, or immediate family, or relational issues with their children.
Right.
I mean, we had really great people. Our mentors they're awesome people. But essentially the mentors really were able to be present with folks in a much different way. So we learned a lot through the mentor process as well. We moved from a one-parent to two-parent design. That got really interesting. And again, if you're thinking of doing any kind of visitation programming, I would, and you might know this already, but we thought we knew it. And we learned a lot of things, particularly around, as I said, physical and emotional safety. We had the room, we had all of the, some, schedules and things like that all set up. But it's really those relational components that you have to really pay attention to, particularly prior to a visit and after a visit. A lot of relational dynamics that go on between those two parents, whether they're getting along or they're not.
Right.
And then, as I said, we had to redesign, including specific guidelines around safety. And safety, as I said, being on multiple levels, not just, who's entering the building. As I said, a lot of our families brought extra people with them. Right. And sometimes wouldn't identify those extra people. So we had to really set up firm guidelines around limiting that. And then, as I said, really good communication before and after visits around what those expectations would be.
And one of the things about this whole visitation component was that our visitation center is in the basement of our building. And so if you had parents who were becoming violent or had the potential to be violent, you really had to be planful in how you were going to get people to and from the center in the basement, how you're going to get folks out of there. And I mean, it was just, having security on staff or, making sure people knew we were in the basement at a certain time, just so that everyone was safe.
Absolutely. And we had to do a lot of processing during team meetings, not as much as parents and the children, the clients were all in the foster parents and other clinicians. We also had to talk a lot about us being safe, our workers, not just physically but also emotionally safe. They were hearing lots of, and one of our clinicians particularly is newer to the field, so there's a lot of follow-up conversations and support that we needed to provide to her to support her through some of the things that she was hearing that she didn't anticipate. Or thought she anticipated, but then felt it resonated at a different level with her. And so and then parental dysregulation had to be planned for and addressed. Collaborate with community and other providers. We did offer some of these trainings out there. I forgot, as far as tools. Not only did we do the NICVSG, but we also did the ASQs. We did ASQs and the ASQ-SE. That's how we also measured. I knew there was one of the instruments that we forgot. So we collaborated with other providers, and then we added in that 3-month follow-up visit to ensure skill acquisition. And then I can't stress enough the importance of data-driven services and the client's feedback. Through this whole process, particularly with making changes to an evidence-based approach, having the client's feedback about their experience of that evidence-based approach, and then giving that to the national office, having conversations with them around what adaptations we could make, really, really was a helpful learning process for us. And I think it got us better results over time, but as far as seeing that through our data and the comparison across our data, we wouldn't have been able to do that if we were just kind of going on a gut feeling. We really needed an evaluation component that looked pretty extensively at what was going on with the data. So again, I can't stress enough the importance of that feedback. So we've come to the point as far as the presentation, so we'd love to take questions.
So you presented this model where you work with the National Center of PFR to make these adaptations, and they are, it sounds like, incredibly accommodating. I know that hasn't been the experience of certainly other AIA grantees with different evidence-based models, that there's been quite a bit of resistance in the field to making adaptations.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know, did they still consider you to be implementing the model with fidelity? Would you still be included in any cross-site evaluations that they conducted on the model?
So I don't know that we were, when I talked to the director there, when we were first looking into which, when we were applying for the AIA grant, what I liked about this approach was that it was an approach. It wasn't, it certainly has a curriculum. It had fluidity to it, and I think you need that as much as completely support evidence-based models. I love them, and at the same time, I do think when you're translating something from one population to another population, you really have to be mindful of what that looks like. And as I said, we chose PFR specifically for the fact that it felt like it was going to be flexible to us to a certain degree. We're not part of a national database with this. This is our own research. And what they had said to me when I had contacted them initially was that certainly they would be interested in hearing how we were, how we did our work with them. But we weren't as concerned about fidelity as much as we were concerned about outcomes and client outcomes. Mm-hmm. So I think it's hard because I think it's a balance between doing what makes sense for the population you're serving, and at the same time sticking as closely as you can to what has been put out there, and we know that works. But I think you have to. It's a hard balance, I think.
Absolutely, and we also through the national office, we actually did distance learning with them.
Yeah, we did
for about a year, and that was their way of really making sure that we were using the model per their guidelines.
Right. And again, when we say model, it's an approach.
Right.
It's when you get the materials and you look through it, it's and the handouts and everything else. It's an approach. It's not as regimented. It definitely takes into account the relationship with that parent and with that child, and it honors the fact that that's a unique relationship and that there's going to be some variance. So I think my lesson learned as a director is when I'm looking in the future for evidence-based practices, I'm going to continue to look for evidence-based practices that allow for that to a certain degree. Mm-hmm. Again, I don't want to get away from fidelity. I certainly honor that. And at the same time, if I have to choose between following the rules strictly and never towing out of that and getting good outcomes, I'm going to, from my perspective, kind of want to look towards good outcomes for our families. So I hope that answers the question. I know it's hard sometimes. Yeah.
No, thank you. I appreciate that perspective. Could you share the age range of the children involved? Were there infants or were they more toddlers and up?
Both. 0 to 3 was the population we were serving. And that really allowed for us to do this early childhood, bonding piece. So that was the population we were serving, 0 to 3.
Then you mentioned that most of these visits took place at your visitation center. Were any done in the home, and did you notice a difference in outcomes between those sessions versus the ones that happened in the visitation?
No. I mean, we actually did visits in the home. We did visits in the community, and we did visits in the center. Usually the ones that were done in the center were when they really needed to be supervised and really regimented.
And a lot more concerns as far as safety.
Safety. Right.
By our child welfare folk. And we also did a few down at, I know I videotaped one down at the department.
Right.
And I will say that I only did it once, so I can't give you, I mean, this is a one-time thing, but we know that parents are a little bit, they're stressed differently when they're at the child welfare offices than they are in their own homes or some other more, we were always perceived by families, or generally they told us they perceived us as more neutral.
Right.
So, than the child welfare offices. So
what we did see is that when we were in their home, the visits were totally different than what they were at the department. They felt they were being watched, and unfortunately, the agency, the way that they were set up, I call it the fishbowl. It was this huge window. Anyone could look in during your visit with your child for a supervised visit.
It's the windows off the lobby.
Right. So, I mean, it just did not... Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So, I mean, doing visits in the home really allowed for us as the clinician to really see them in their element. See the child in its element, see the parent in its element.
We have two more questions. Let's see if we can get to them both here before we wrap up. The first one is, to me, you did not so much adapt PFR as create a scaffolding around it. Also, the fidelity to the PFR consultation strategies is probably the most critical skill to maintain among your home visitors. Would you agree?
Wow. How? I like that question. I think that's I hadn't thought of it that way. Thank you, whoever that is.
Yep.
Send me an email.
Sure.
Yes.
But I would say I think I agree with that, is that, because, PFR isn't, again, it's an approach, and you're right, we did build a program around that approach. I think that's a good way to conceptualize it. I think I agree with that.
Yeah, me too. Definitely.
Easy enough. And then do you do any evaluations for mental disabilities of the child, and then work with the parent in regards to any findings?
Mental disabilities. So we actually, the ASQs are done, and they assess communication, gross motor, fine motor, problem solving, and that usually is our first kind of step into saying they need more assessment. If they score at a level that is low enough for them to need more services, we make a referral to our in-house early intervention program.
Oh, that's one of the other programs we have. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We also have, referred out for not so much in this program. Well, one kid in this program.
Yeah.
For who had specific medical issues going on that we knew, based on those medical issues, that there was going to be some long-term kind of concerns. So, but we mostly went through early intervention. We didn't necessarily provide that service ourselves. We're blessed with an agency who specializes in young children overall, and usually our 0 to 8 population is really where we focused a lot of our efforts here at Children's Friend. And I would say that we have a lot of in-house folks who are very helpful to be able to do that. So that's not something we necessarily took on ourselves.
No, and we work collaboratively with them. So
Absolutely.
We always would plan with them and communicate with them to make sure that child's needs were being met.
Great. Well, thank you so much, both of you, Tina and Regina, and thank all of you who were on the call with us today. This webinar was recorded, and it will be on our website, aia.berkeley.edu, within the week. If you missed any section or want to share with coworkers, please feel free to do so. And for those of you who are interested, we'll be hosting a webinar tomorrow with Dr. Victoria Cargill on the intersection of HIV and poverty, and then another webinar with Jocelyn Fontaine on May 3rd on supporting justice-involved families. You can find more information about the rest of our 2016 webinar series on our website. Again, it is aia.berkeley.edu. Thank you again, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye.